Let's have a little chat.
Excellent.
It does. Goofy. With the weather. You know, just how,
Yeah, John is,
now, the same.
he has a good time with those. And there's this group,
Oh, yeah.
Antique Fan Collectors. And it's like very strange. They are a wild and crazy bunch.
Yeah, even some like they were. Who's off, Cornaway, Current was down.
They have that size
Jack
7.
Park wasn't.
Well, this is,
I think lately it's.
yeah, this is in Tulsa. They meet once a year and they move it around. I have no idea where it is. No, it's at a hotel. And,
You know what, we've had a good,
let's see here. There we go. This was we were in
out of the woodwork.
in a swine barn. And like this thing, 100 years old.
Call to meeting, the Planning and Zoning Commission for Monday, July 12th, 7 o'clock. Roll call.
Okay, Mark Hydrich. Mark Kleesner.
Here.
Mark Piontek.
Here.
Tom Holtmeyer.
Here.
It's our base.
Sandy Lucy.
Here.
John Borgman.
Here.
Chuck Watson.
Here.
Samantha Wacker.
Here.
Carolyn Witt.
Here.
And Sal Maniaci.
Here.
All right.
Please rise for a pledge of
If
allegiance.
your air conditioner goes in, call me.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
First item on the agenda is the approval of the minutes from the June 14th, 2021 meeting.
Motion to approve.
Second.
First and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? So moved. Moving on to item number 3, file number 210701. The applicant is requesting approval of a special use permit at 309 Locust Street. And I'll also just read item number 4, file number 210702. The applicant is requesting approval of special use permit at 317 Locust Street, since they're the same applicant.
Yes, thank you, and I'll just do a quick presentation on both because
and I said, hey, Sal, when's appropriate for us to join the conversation? And so after, I didn't want to come in after you guys have had all this, but I didn't want to get in the way either of things. He thought it was appropriate now to join the conversation. So I want to thank you guys for hearing our opinion now. I guess the main thing is that, Sal, do you have that presentation up? My power, oh,
That's yours.
oh, that's right.
Yep.
Man, clicker. Oh, you're right. Sorry. I looked at that and it looked like ours. So basically, as you guys already know, that's the boundary, the proposed C3 zoning district, and that's the latest revised one, and it hasn't been revised any more than that, right, Sal?
That's the one tonight.
So basically what we noticed was it went about 2 blocks further to the south and went about 2 2/3 blocks further to the west. And so we were trying to kind of figure that out, what we're trying to do there. So we looked at where we were at in relationship to that, and basically the western limit of Tony's Elijah's is about 2 blocks to the west. So geographically, we didn't think we were too far outside the boundary area, you might say. So moving forward from there, one thing we looked at was, the codes, what's the purpose of the intent of a C3 zoning district? And as you guys know, it's about the historic and unique area of the city, about the downtown area, and it's about basically a mixture of residential and commercial to promote the unique characteristics of the area not found anywhere else in the city. That's kind of in a nutshell. So we looked at a historic map, historically what we thought, how this was significant. And what we noticed was the area in green, that was in 2015. I'm not sure how long it took to prepare this. Probably Carolyn knows all that. But this was what was published in January of 2015, you might say. And at that time, it did include Elijah McClain's, obviously, because as you guys know, it's probably, the home was built in 1839, and it's one of the 5 oldest structures in Washington, from what we can tell. So naturally, it would have been included in the historic design review area. So when we looked at the historic compared to your proposed C3, it was uncanny how close it was, meaning that that's what the area is now being proposed.
Thank you.
And you look at it, just as you guys just had a conversation about Cedar Street, Cedar Street is primarily all residential, so it wouldn't make sense to include that in C3, which you obviously did not. But it was interesting how close it got to that. And I think Mark had a good point a while ago about expanding the use to the north, as the parking areas outside of the north of Front Street, serve the areas to the south side. So I think it's a good point that Mark made about that. So I just wanted kind of us to think about that historically, how significant Elijah McClain's is related to a C3 district. And then going on from there. So this was the purpose and intent of a C3 district. So as you guys know, that's kind of what we talked about. It was built in 1839. It is near residential, and it is C2 right now. So it's near it's near the C3 district right now. So in conclusion, we're talking about the C3 expansion, south, east, west, and north, as Mark mentioned, kind of including, expand that boundary. 1839 was a structure, one of the 5 oldest buildings in the city, been there a long time. And we don't know why, like this was dropped from the C3, meaning it was in the 2015, but we don't know why. It maybe just wasn't thought about, perhaps. And I guess historically versus newer, the rebuilding of the downtown area like Sugar Fire and all the stuff that's on the west side, there are newer buildings that are located in C3. I guess also one of the things that was brought, let me go back to the map here. We're thinking about things tonight. About cleaning things up. So you mentioned the combination of residential uses and the commercial. There's about 4 parcels that are south of Elijah McClain's here that a C3 district might include those also. That would make them conforming. So to clean up a non-conforming use, those houses are built on an alley, and I don't think they conform to current standards.
Probably not.
Yeah. And so basically, I think Elijah's, don't quote me on this, but I think it's the only business in downtown that's not C3. And I guess basically, in a nutshell, we're just asking to be considered equally with the other residences and commercial businesses that are in that downtown area. So, in summary, that's my
Sal, you have
spiel.
anything?
Well, and I think, obviously Cameron and I spoke when he's asked when would be a good time to come to this meeting. So, we talked about this a little bit, and that's partly why I brought up, and I spoke with Cameron before our meeting Friday. I think there is an argument that it's, Elijah McClain's it was part of that historic design review area for a reason. It is part of downtown, but I think, we can't get over the fact that it is adjacent to historically single-family residential neighborhood, that if you're going to talk natural growth boundaries, I think Elijah McClain's, because of the fact it blocks Main Street off from that, it is in itself a growth boundary to the west. And so that's why I brought up earlier the fact that if you are going to include some properties that are adjacent to single-family residential, maybe with that code revision, you include protections for the parking adjacent to there. Say that you're part of the C3 district, you get those additional uses, but because of the fact that you're adjacent to single-family residential, you have to provide off-street parking. That was, an alternative I thought that could be met, kind of a compromise to show, yep, it's considered it's inside this growth boundary. I don't think that is necessarily a downside to that. Also, he's got the pointer. I can just use this. You got it. Yeah. I think it got brought up with, if someone were to come in today, say we weren't doing any of this rezoning, we weren't doing any of this growth boundary or anything. If someone were to come in and purchase these apartments here that, they're a little bit older there and wanted to do a very similar Rhine River development, would we turn away at that and say that's not appropriate? Probably not. We would probably encourage that type of redevelopment there and encourage, the expansion. And then you're already there. You're already where you're at Elijah McClain's. So I think there's a possibility of including it, but the whole point when we recommend denial of that rezoning was the same reason we recommend denial on Market Street about 4 months ago. It is not adjacent, and we don't want to open up that can of worms where we start doing it outside the block of C3, because you have to, where do you stop at that point? And then parking. We brought up parking on Market Street as well, where if you're going to do that and you have traditional single-family homes right there, how's that going to impact the people who are already there that aren't across the street from a plug parking lot or haven't had that their entire existence. So I do think that could be a possible alternative of, we already have that on the zero lot line, and you could add the additional parking requirement.
Well, we've been through a lot of discussion about these boundaries, and, I don't think the boundaries are irrational. There are properties that are historic but are not included in these. So the idea of it, the historic review boundary versus this boundary, they're two different things. We're comparing apples and oranges. We're not talking about expansion of the downtown use when we're talking about design review. So, I would not be in favor of expanding this in either direction. We've gone through it and we've talked about it. And
Samantha, why aren't they in conformance? The
why
purpose,
or what? I'm sorry.
the zoning district, the intent of the zoning district is to complete basically the harmonious use of commercial and residential related to historic significance. Mm-hmm. So I think they can be put together. They don't need to be separated. They need to be put together. If you're out in, Greenfield, if you're out south of 100, then there's no historical downtown significance out there. So that C3 wouldn't be appropriate there, but this is solely what this is for.
Well, and Cameron, with all due respect, we talked about, when we were talking about these boundaries, we talked about
Right.
how far do we go to the south? Talking
Right.
about, do we go as far as the brewery? Do we go as far as that? You have to draw the line. And what is logically considered downtown, it doesn't normally go that far west as far as, I think, what is considered downtown or what the uses we got. So I don't think it's an irrational boundary whatsoever.
And I guess that was my point of the geographic limitation, is that basically, when you're considering moving the boundary, I think you're the one, you and Witt and somebody else recommended moving the boundary south, correct? expanding
Somewhat
it?
south, but
What's
not,
that?
somewhat south, but not as far south as some other,
Right, so,
towns are
so
proposing.
basically you moved it 2 blocks south, we're proposing to move it 2 blocks west.
well, I think we suggested moving it a half a block south to
Well-
cover the other side of Fifth Street.
Yeah, so that's 2 blocks. It's a let me pull up map back
Yeah,
up.
let's see what it was. Sorry. It stopped at 4th Street in our original proposal, and then we amended it a block and a half to go, well.
Well, you were half
if you count
block-
If you count Manny Lutheran, it's 2 blocks. It depends on how big the parcel is, but yeah.
We went to Fifth Street because we thought that was an
Yeah,
adequate.
1 block to 5th Street, but then a half a block south of 5th Street, correct?
Right. Well, you're already a half block north of 4th Street though to begin with.
Well, and Cameron, obviously, if, we're talking about making this, rezoning the properties, there's going to be public hearing and more opportunities for public
Right.
input. I mean, this does seem to me to be a backdoor attempt to obtain something that there was an individualized public hearing about this particular property that you're trying to talk about today, and there was a lot of opposition to that. So this seems to be a backdoor attempt to
I
get
don't-
what was attempted to be gotten. And certainly, I mean, that's up to, your property owner if they want to apply or they want
Right.
to ask for different things. But, I mean,
I came here based on the recommendation of Sal.
Sure.
I don't think it's a backdoor attempt. I wouldn't have came here tonight if Sal had not, because I asked him specifically when to join the conversation, right? Because this is not just a benefit to us, it's a
Sure.
benefit to everybody that's being expanded.
it's a
into-
public conversation.
Right.
Absolutely.
Right. So I don't,
How's it going to benefit you?
how's it going to benefit us? So basically, the purpose of the rezoning altogether was this, Tom. Right now, the C3 code does not allow for a permanent, let me get this wrong, Sal, correct me if I'm wrong about this. There's a tent there. 6 months out of the year is all you're allowed to put it up, right?
That's C2.
Yeah, so, right.
C2.
Right, C2, right. So what happened is basically Tony wanted the ability to put up a permanent, nice-looking structure and not be subjected to damage like he was just this past Friday evening, right? Just like perhaps the VFW has, perhaps like the Hummingbird has, something more permanent and aesthetically pleasing than a tent. That was the whole purpose of the, does that answer your question, Tom?
Yeah, well, yeah, I just,
Yeah,
I
that
just
was the-
wanted everybody to be aware of what
Right.
was going on.
So our building code, this is not even anything related with the zoning code. Once it's there more than 6 months, it's considered permanent, and then it's considered a structure, meaning it has to meet parking requirements. And that was the whole point, that once it was there 6 months, you have to follow the parking requirements for whatever that structure is. C3 obviously didn't have parking requirements, so.
You want to build a permanent structure?
Yeah.
I mean, do you have
Yes.
plans to build a permanent structure? Have you brought those forth to have they come forward? Have you seen plans?
No, so the plan was, I think that's why they wanted to rezone it first and then submit the plans, because once it's in there permanently, you have to have parking for it.
So, Cameron, help me out here. So if it was included within the C3 district as you're proposing, but the city added a requirement that if you're adjacent to residential, you still have to have off-street parking, how does that benefit you?
So that's a good question. So basically, I don't know to answer your question, right? Meaning that there could be, in that district, there could be, we don't know what that code says, don't know what it looks like. So I don't know how to answer that question exactly. Now, if it just reverts back to what it is today, you're correct. It wouldn't benefit, right? But I think the thing that we're talking about is that the C3 is unique in the fact that it allows for relaxation of parking requirements to promote.
Yeah, I mean, let's just cut through it all.
Right.
What you're really trying to do is avoid having to have on-street park or off-street parking. That's what you're really after.
Right, but isn't that the whole point of the C3 district for everybody? Isn't that aren't we just asking to be treated like everybody else?
Where it's appropriate, yes.
Right, where it's appropriate.
But I think, and we went through this 6 months, a year ago,
Okay,
and it got turned down for the reason that people have said there's parking in the neighborhood that's a problem, and so I guess I'm having trouble understanding what is going to be accomplished here other than you're going to eliminate the off-street parking requirement,
Well, and the other thing
which
that
is
was,
only going to make the problem worse. And I don't know, I saw the article in the newspaper this weekend about the bridal boom and about how the two managers at Elijah McClain said, 2020 or 1 and 22 is going to be huge. We're going to have, more than 200 people here on a regular basis. So that all tells me that there's going to be a parking problem there. And it's not going to get better if it's C3.
well, the other proposal, as I heard, if I understood correctly, is that we're talking about in the C3 that would be adjacent to residential, you wouldn't necessarily get the benefit of the 0 lot line either. That was, so,
That's already,
but it's,
Existing.
but that's important to note, I think.
Yeah.
If you're building additional structures on property, but.
correct.
I mean, if you look at, I mean, Cameron, the rationale that you're proposing to include this property would be the same rationale to include Cedar Street. I mean, it's.
No, because there's no commercial use on Cedar Street.
I'm sorry?
There's no commercial use on Cedar
There
Street.
has been in the past.
On the residences, then the
There-
Tibby overlay
Oh,
district?
yes. I mean, it used to be a funeral home. I mean, it's, it used to
Yeah.
be a medical office. I mean, there have been historically,
Used to be on,
multi-use.
What,
Right.
Fourth and Cedar, once
Right.
upon a time was a
Ex-
gas station, it was
I
a
remember
cab
that.
stand.
Exactly.
Cabs, yeah.
Right. I mean, so
Cab
historically,
stand.
yes,
Station
there have been.
for bus
And
stop.
so we're proposing to not have those,
I've been
for,
here
because
too
that's a special area. And as you've said, this is a special property. So there's reasons that the lines are where they are.
Okay.
Any other questions, comments from board? Anything else? Anybody else want to say anything?
Sandy, would you like to see what the structure would look like, the pavilion? Sometime? Okay, all right, we'll work on that.
Now, also, at that same meeting that, I guess it's been a year ago or so, but you
Right.
guys had a concept for some parking on Stafford Street.
Correct?
Maybe some plans on something like that might help as well.
Okay.
Or maybe just some plans for parking on your property.
Yeah, well, and that's where I think what we, in our staff report, I'd have to pull it up, but I think what we recommended last time when we recommended denial was that there is an alternative route where they could ask for a variance while showing, hey, we're going to put parking on Stafford, we're going to put a staircase up so they don't have to walk, people would actually park on Stafford because you could connect to it. And a big thing was having a gate on Johnson Street so that people couldn't get it. So that's where it was like, I don't think it's out of the question to get a parking variance because, again, like Mark said, you're going to cut through it. The tent's there 6 months out of the year, so that use is already there legally, and there's already a parking problem that we can do nothing about, so all you're doing is making that existing problem happen year-round rather than half of the year. Is that really different? But if you're going to at least try and better the situation, I could sit there at a Board of Adjustment meeting and say, hey, look, we're in favor of this variance because they came up with these other provisions, rather than rezone and they don't have to do anything. So that was, because it's been a year, that was kind of the whole point of that last discussion, that we could go that route, because there's other venues to say, hey, look, this is a unique property, it's not C3, it may not meet the full parking calculation, but 6 months out of the year, they already have 200 people there. We're just trying to make it a better situation, and in reality, the biggest thing is, especially, if you have people from out of town, they're going to put in the address on Front Street, they're going to go park. Google's going to take them to Front Street. But if you have someone who says, oh, I know that hill, I'm going to go park on Johnson Street and pull that in, and that seems to be from the complaints we've gotten. Again, I haven't been there at a wedding where I'm driving up and down Main, but from the complaints our traffic committee has gotten, people come and park on Main and Johnson and use that gate. And so I think there are some ways to say, hey, look, we'll amend that, we'll put parking on Stafford, we'll close that gate to the public. I know our fire department does not want it closed permanently, so obviously we'd have to do a Knox box, whatever they call them. And so I think if we want to include it, so there's a motion to amend this map. I was already thinking about adding that parking requirement because that came up on Market Street as well. There are 4 houses there that we thought may have some opposition, that we said, hey, look, if you're in the district, but if someone right next to you wants to put in a business, they do have to put some type of parking, that's something we can all come up with at the public hearing. We can, whenever we send this letter, we can make that amendment anyway. So I think there's 2 options there. We can not include Elijah McClain's, go back to the barrier we have, or the boundary we have with the possibility of a variance, or include it and have that parking requirement. Would be my recommendation, to have the intent of what we're trying to do. Your intent's there on both avenues.
Have you submitted any plans for that parking requirement we talked about a year ago?
No more plans than what was on the original presentation back in May of last year. We, like Mark indicated, there was two ideas that we had actually presented. One was parking along the east side there, Stafford Street, and then the other was actually just as what was built out in front, just as the parking lot was built out in front of Sugar Fire and all that, there's still a vacant ground to the west of that parking lot on Front Street.
Yeah, you had that expanded for 16 more stalls or something, I think.
I thought it was 30.
Oh, 30, okay, there you
I
go.
thought it was 30 some spaces there.
I think, Cameron, if you remember, something that came out of that meeting also was a suggestion to consider PDC to have a creative use to get that property, because that PDC is intended for properties that are unique and maybe wouldn't necessarily fit into a neat box. But that was suggested at that meeting that might get you where you want to go.
Yeah, that or a variance could do that, because if you go to the PDC route, it's longer and you have to have the plans up front, but you can, just like the shoe factory did, design your parking up front as part of that plan, and then you don't have to go to get a variance. So there's, yeah, correct, there's avenues.
There would be other ways to do that.
So, and I would not be surprised if when we have this public hearing, and some of these other neighbors, they want that parking requirement may get requested to be thrown in there either at the next public hearing here in August, or at city council, because I know that will come up as saying, okay, what happens, I know this is really zoomed out, but if you have properties over here on Market Street that don't want, all the street parking taken, or right here along Second Street, or, well, I'm sorry, I keep pulling up the old map. Too many PowerPoints open. So we took this out, and then we added it down south. But, if you could see some of these homes saying, hey, look, if this got redeveloped right here, they may not want that no off-street parking. So we could require these uses that are right on the boundary to have off-street parking as part of it. And maybe it's a reduced off-street parking. You have to provide some. Maybe it's 75% of your requirement. That's all something I think could come up through our public hearing process, but I think regardless, that's going to be a discussion.
Yes.
Yeah, just a few things,
If you would, introduce yourself.
I'm sorry, I'm Tony Bequette. I own Elijah McLean's. And just a few things, I'll quote the article when I found out about it. And Sal said, this overlay district would allow any development that was previously only allowed in C3 zoning or within the downtown district to be allowed in a few more blocks. Well, we are a few more blocks. And again, to quote Sal, the point is to get less restrictions, to have fewer hurdles for anyone who is interested in developing property in downtown. If I just have a hard time buying the Elijah McLean's, it's not part of downtown. It's on the riverfront. It's 2 blocks from all the downtown development that's happening now. And I'll quote Mrs. Wacker, I think we all want downtown to evolve and grow. We also want to be flexible within reason. Parking has always been an issue at Elijah's because of one homeowner. That homeowner is not allowed on our property. The cops will arrest her for trespass. She's been so difficult. Elijah McLean's is the largest parcel in downtown. It has the most parking of any parcel downtown. And to further hamstring us, it's just, we can't grow. We can already park with the tent. So the parking is going to be there with our business 6 months out of the year, okay? So it does. We can create the parking for the pavilion, but to do that, we would have to build a parking lot in the whole front of that property. That whole front of that property would be a parking lot. So I don't know if that's what people want to see, if they want to see a parking lot when they drive up to Elijah McLean's, because that's all they're going to see. And with all due respect, Sam, I don't believe you should be commenting on this because you are my ex-wife's attorney and we don't get along. And I know you're driving this, so that has to be considered also. And there's no reason that Elijah's isn't included in this overlay. We're zone C2. We're the only property that's commercial now, part of this zoning, and we're zone C2. You would also clean up the properties to the south of Elijah. They're non-conforming as they are now. It would clean those up. This makes perfect sense to include Elijah's. I just don't see how you guys think it shouldn't be part of the downtown.
Well, I think you
and
guys
the
are very harmonious, historical-wise. But if you could come up with some good plans on parking and maybe,
But once again, I would like to be treated equally like everybody in this overlay.
but I wouldn't be opposed to voting it through if you come up with some good plans as an individual.
Once again, I would like to be treated equally as everybody in the C3 zoning and the overlay. That's all I have. If you have any questions, I'd like to address them.
And Mr. Requette, with all due respect, as you'll recall, I didn't vote on your prior proposal.
I understand,
And-
but you're also, it's obvious you're driving the tone of this
No.
meeting.
Oh, that's
And
that's
with all due
enough.
respect,
That's
I-
enough.
No,
Let's get
no,
back to business.
Sam, I agree with you that we went through this quite some time, we had neighbors, we had a lot of discussion, and I don't see that anything has really changed myself. From what the original, and I'm sorry, that's not what you want to hear, but that's.
I understand.
And I don't have anything to do with anybody's divorce, so.
You're right.
And I guess with the accusation here, I need to comment, with all due respect, it wasn't my idea to create the boundaries on that side of the street. That came from someone other than.
But you were for extending them elsewhere except towards Elijah McLean's.
I think you're overestimating her power. I appreciate that, but, I respect you greatly, but you're just one of many voices.
Well, if there's any questions, I'd like to address them.
Any questions? All right, thank you. Anything else by board members or anybody else in the crowd?
So then,
So
go
we
ahead.
go then, and we're going to look at making it all C3
So-
instead of an overlay.
What I'll do is, just on September agenda, I'll have a request for rezoning, and we'll just list every address. That's listed in there, we'll have it as one item. And then I'll also have, what's that, I'm sorry?
When would be the public hearing? In August?
It'll be our next meeting, because at this point, I don't, we'll also have to do the code amendment to the intent, and then the four-way intersections. It would be the 9th. It's early. Because the 1st is a Sunday. So yeah, it'll be, P and Z is on the 9th. And then,
Yeah, I'll probably be out of town. That's okay.
this will probably be one that I will not schedule the council right away. We'll probably have to notice it twice, because what'll happen, if I put it in the paper that it's going to be at the council meeting the 16th, we'll probably have some amendments, and then I'll have to change the notice. So what we'll do is we'll put it for P and Z at the 9th for sure, and then after that vote, if it gets, if parking gets amended, if we decide, because I do think, we're going to have to discuss the possibility of all this being a growth boundary, because what happens is some of this, someone comes in with a whole block proposal right outside of this. So I think we're going to have to address the definition of the intent in this, of being able to expand this further out, that kind of thing. So, long story short, we'll have it on the 9th. We'll notice, we'll get a letter together, and we'll kind of go through and make sure we get the language as clear as possible. I'll kind of pass that around administration, so I get a couple eyes on it, and then go from there. As of right now, I don't have anything else on September's meeting, so.
So to be clear, so there's no, we're not voting on anything that has to do with this tonight?
No, nope, this was just a discussion item. I guess a motion could be made if we want to amend this again, but in reality, that could be done on the 9th as well in August, so.
All righty. If there's no further discussion, I'll entertain one last motion.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
I was just going to say, I
All
got it.
those in favor? Any opposed?
Aye.
So moved.
Did you get enough ayes?
Yes. All right.
That's his motivation. Mark hit it right on the nail. That was exactly right.
Fancy.
That's what it's all about.
Get out of there, there you
I
go.
don't care how
right,
well
thanks.
you
We'll see
wrap
ya.
it up.